Today we're going to take a look at mixing and editing vocals, probably in the reverse order. We're going to take a look at editing and mixing vocals, but you know what? We're actually going to mix the vocals a bit, and then we're going to do some editing, and I'll explain why. The main concepts that we're going to cover today are trim, EQ, compression, using returns, strip silence, clip gain, which is a feature in Pro Tools. We're going to take a look at time-based effects, delays, and reverbs. And finally, we're going to take a look at using automation on vocals and automation on effects. So that's the plan. It will probably be somewhat lengthy, so maybe take it in bites. But let's dive into the session. We're going to be using a session we recorded here at the studio called the song is called Jericho. Okay, so let's take a listen to one portion of the song. There's going to be some lead vocals happening, there's some ad-libs happening, and some background vocals. So there's going to be lots of vocals. Let's just listen to the full mix at this point. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win, captivate my soul. I was lost in sin, when I was in control. Then your son stepped in, the glory of it all. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win, captivate my soul. I was lost in sin, when I was in control. Then your son stepped in, the glory of it all. So let the walls. Cool. All right, so we listen to the chorus. You can hear there's background vocals happening. There's two leads, and then there's some ad-libs. So let's take a look first, and we're going to take a look at, we're going to start at the start. I have a lead vocal track right here, and we're going to solo this up. I have a bunch of processing on this track, and it looks like I have some EQ, some de-essers, and we're going to get into what that is. But then I also have some effects sends right here. I'm just going to disable all of this processing off the track to begin. So we're going to have this. So Shift A will help me disable bypass. Once everything is in blue, it goes to bypass. So we can just listen to this vocal. And then I'm going to disable these sends as well. And we'll get into sends in a little bit, but I have 10 inserts available. So those effects, and those are things happening directly to that track. But then I also have sends. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And sends are a little bit different. So I'm sending this track to another aux track. Perhaps there's an effect on it. We'll get into that. So let's just take a listen to this vocal, no processing. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul. I was lost in sin when I... So that's our vocal capture. Now, very quick, let's just jump ahead to the end. Let's take a listen. What was the finished result of that? So let's turn all these back on. I'm just command clicking those. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And let's kind of get into what that difference is. The first thing we want to look at when we have a vocal is the actual gain of the vocal. I'm going to turn this automation off as well just right now so this fader doesn't jump around on us. And I'll turn it back on in the end when we get to automation. But the first thing I want to look at very quickly is the actual level of the vocal itself. So let's just take a look at the meter. And if you click on this little fader right here, it's just a little bit easier to watch. So let's take a look at the max volume in decibels of this vocal. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul. So it's interesting in Pro Tools drawing, we're probably closer to unity than I'd want to be. But safe to say, like, it kind of, the meter kind of averages around minus 10 dB or so. Kind of today with recording, you've got bit depths, like this is a 24 bit depth in the song, which is really just maybe a fancier way of saying, hey, you have a lot of room for dynamic range and a lot of headroom to record. So you can record stuff at low volumes, and the interface or your converter will capture it, or you can record stuff at hotter volumes, and the interface or converter will capture that. It's 24 bits, so there's a lot of dynamic range there. I'm just trying to see if I recorded stuff, and if I ever see my levels like down like -30, -35, -40, I'm gonna add some trim. I typically don't like to grab my faders and have to crank them all the way up to the top of the top, like, which is here is like plus 12. I don't like to do that because if I do that, there's not a lot more room so for me to come in and adjust it. So I can't really turn it up anymore. So I'm always trying to have my meters live somewhere between like -18 dB and -6. So that's kind of where I'm starting from. If it gets a little louder or a little quieter, that's fine. But that's the first thing. So meters between -18 and -6. Let's say it was quite a bit lower. Then I would just come up here to my insert, and I can start typing in trim, and I can find this trim plugin. And right here, I can turn it up. If I crank it, I can go up 6 dB, or I have another selection I can make where I have plus 12 dB a gain. So that's where I would adjust my gain. So if I just crank that, now we're going to be clipping, so this will be loud. But
so let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you.
So the same thing, if I had a hotter capture, but if you captured distortion and clipping, you're in trouble. But if you just had a hotter capture without that, you could actually turn it down. So I could come in, and now I have minus 23 dB a gain.
So let the walls cave in, break my.
So that's the first plugin. I can turn this off because my levels were pretty good. They're a little hot, but they're good. I'm happy with them. But trim is the first thing you're going to grab, and trim is just like a gain knob on a console, okay? So that's the first thing. So he's sitting okay. The next thing I like to do is actually, before I get into editing, I like to add a compressor. So you might be like, well, why do you want to add a compressor, Ben? Well, when I get into editing, what I'm going to listen for are lip smacks, weird breathing, room noise. And after I add that compression, that really kind of brings all of those things to light. I find one of the mistakes I made earlier on in mixing is I would edit first. So I would come in and I would use clip gain to de-ess vocals, which we're going to do. I would strip silence things. I would create my fades, my in and out points. And then I would add a compressor. And then I would start to hear all these additional weird breaths, all these additional pops, all these additional room noises that maybe we captured while we were recording, noises, maybe the doors opening and shutting. So what I've started to do is I add the compression first, and then I get into editing. So oftentimes I'll add the compression and I'll EQ it. So I'm like, hey, this is what I want the vocal to sound like, and now let me edit it after the fact. So let's do some of that. So I'm going to add the compressor. And you know what? This is no compression.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know.
This is with compression. This is 1176. I like to use the black face like 1176 on vocals. Typically, the one that's more commonly used is I think some folks call it like the bluey, but it's the silver one with blue right around here. I find that changes the tone and the color of my vocal so much, I don't usually like it. I do use it, but quite often I'll use this black one. So let's have a listen with compression.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know.
Before.
So let the walls cave in.
After.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know.
So this compressor kind of pushes the vocals forward just a little bit, and what I've got dialed in here on my input, um, just after like 12 o'clock, I kind of use time to think about this. Output is about the same. I'm gain matching, so I'm trying to keep the same level overall, but with compression, so it's just something that's a bit more even. I have a fairly quick attack on this vocal, and I have a very fast release. So the way that these works, the attack works is 1 is super quick and 7 is a little bit slower. But on release, 7 is super quick and 1 is a little bit slower. That's just the way it works on this 1176. For a ratio, I've got an 8-to-1, so it's pretty heavy compression, and I'm hitting the needle pretty hard. So which is common in kind of pop commercial kind of sounds. So let's take a look next. I have a de-esser. So what compression inevitably does is it turns up everything. And the way that the human voice works is when we say S words, we kind of like go to town on that, or T's. So this de-esser is going to help tame some of that right off the bat. So I haven't started editing yet. Okay. Well, I mean, this is edited, but I'm doing this before I start to edit. I'm putting on a compression. I'm using some compression. I'm hitting it with a de-esser, because if the de-esser takes care of a lot of the S's, then I don't have to spend time clip gaining, which we'll show you in a moment. So here is the de-esser. And the de-esser, right now, this is just going to take stuff, my frequencies at 5500. So it's going to look at stuff 5500 and above, because I have this high shelf here. So 5500 and above, if Joey, who's the singer here, has some of those frequencies in his vocal, which he will, and if it goes above this threshold, which looks like it's like 31 minus 31, it's going to turn it down. So let's take a listen to see what our de-esser's doing.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul.
So all the listen for that when I turn it off.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul.
And now listen to those with it back on.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul.
Cool. So that's what the de-esser's doing. It's doing a lot of work for us. And then next I have an EQ dialed in here. Let's take a listen to the EQ. I have a little tiny bit of 14K, and then I'm cutting a little bit more with this narrow Q. So the Qs, talk about that for a second. The Q is the width of your cut or the width of your boost. And you see right here, it looks like a little A, and over here, it's a wider A. And they're called a Q. So right now I have a narrow Q and a cut of like 2 dB or 3.25 dB. I can't really see. It's right around there. I should wear my glasses. Right around 4.5K. So let's take a listen to that. And I have a little teeny tiny boost at 14K. That's all that's happening on this.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul.
I'll keep it off and I'll turn it back on.
So let the walls cave in, break
on.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and
And really on the twos, like that, those same frequencies that de-esser is hitting, that's what that 4.5K. 4.5K can make stuff sound brighter. Think of like hi-hats. But it can also make stuff sound harsh. So the harshness in an acoustic, the harshness in a vocal. If there's too much 4.5K, 3.5, like 3K to 4.5K kind of range, things can get to sounding pretty harsh. So that's what that EQ is doing. It's an SSL, I think, from Waves. Yeah. And it's the G series EQ. So they have a G series. They definitely have an E series.
No, you came.
I will often use two de-essers. That's just the way I roll. I'm not scared to put two de-essers on. If it sounds harsh, I definitely want to come in and help a little bit. So now that we've got this vocal EQ'd and we've got it compressed and we've got it sitting nice, I'm not going to turn on any of the time-based delay stuff. Now I'm ready to go in and take a look at this vocal and edit it. Okay, so we're going to find it. What a session. Big old session. Okay, we are going to find it eventually. There it is. Okay. And this is our section right here that we're dealing with. So there's a little bit of automation, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I am going to take a look at the waveform right here. So the first thing I want to show you is in Pro Tools, this is probably, I say I would buy Pro Tools just for this. I say this more about clip gain than anything. So clip gain for me, when I swapped over from using another DAW into Pro Tools, maybe like 10 years ago now, clip gain was like, wow, because it allowed me to do so much. So first thing I want to show you is how to show and hide the clip gain line. So clip gain. So I'm going to hide this line. So now you notice, everyone noticed like a line disappeared. Well, that was the clip gain line. So the first thing I do when I turn on Pro Tools, if I don't already have it enabled, is I'm going to right click anywhere on a track path, on an audio track path, and I'm going to go down to clip gain and I'm going to say show line. This line is clip gain. What makes clip gain different than volume automation is it's the very first thing that your signal hits. So automation on the volume path, that's the last thing. So the last thing is the fader. The very first thing, kind of like what we did with trim, is clip gain. So I can grab this line right here, and I could never use that trim plugin. I could just use clip gain, which I often do. So I'm looking right now, that's the volume automation line. So if I go back to the track, the waveform, and I select this line, and as long as I have my smart tool enabled, so you hit any like combination of F6 to F8 keys and just hold them in for just like a split second, that smart tool pops up. So if I grab these transients, so these little blobs are called transients, if I grab any one of them and I kind of come down a little bit, you notice how my selector tool flips into a trimmer tool, like an upside down trimmer tool. And then I can turn this down or I can turn it up. Now, this is much different than just resizing like over here and seeing the waveforms bigger. That's not actually making anything louder. This is just so you can see your waveforms. Okay, it's the same volume when I do this. Nothing has changed. So let me just, for example, it looks like, oh, it's crazy loud.
So let the walls
Or, oh, it's crazy quiet.
So let the walls.
It's the same thing. This is just like a view option. So if you hold down option and you, on your mouse, if you go to the right or left, that's like the shortcut for doing, instead of coming over here and clicking on that waveform. So if you hold down option, scroll to the right, you can change like how you're viewing these tracks. You're basically making them small or like jumbo size. But clip gain is different. If I grab this transient and I have the smart tool on and it turns into that trimmer and I turn that up, that's going to be loud.
So let the walls
And listen to that breath. Quiet.
So let the walls.
Okay. So let's start here. This is a breath, and this is where clip gain is so great. So here is my track at the moment.
So let the walls cave in.
And I can take that breath and I can select it. And I go, it turns into that upside down trimmer tool, and I can turn that down. This is usually the first thing I'm doing is I'm fixing fades. So I'm fading in, so I'm selecting the corner of that, and I'm hitting F. So that's faded, and the breath is down.
So let the walls cave in.
And we heard a little pop here.
So let the walls cave in.
That would be a different tool. I would use RX to fix that pop. Let's keep listening.
Walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul. I was lost.
So here's another breath. I would go through and just make sure all the breathing, all of it's pretty consistent. So I'm capturing that. I'm just turning it down a little bit with the clip gain.
So I was lost in sin when I was in control.
There's a
Then you
big listen to that.
was in control. Then you
So right here. So here's a breath right here. So I'm going to go through, I would go through and I would select this breath. I'm in grid mode. So I'm holding down command to break the grid and I'm coming in. I'm just turning that down. Now, there's another way to do that too. We could add nodes to do this. So this is a breath right here. So instead of just selecting that breath, so we could tab in. So I just tabbed, and notice it tabbed right to the breath. So I clicked my cursor before. I'm hitting tab, and this is tab to transient. So this is this button right here. If this button is enabled, this tab to transient button, I can come in and I can tab to the next waveform. And if I hit option tab, it's going to go backwards, which is great. So I'm going to tab, and then it grabs that breath. Then I'm going to hold in shift, and then I'm going to hit tab again, and it's going to go to the next transient, next available transient. This is a great way to edit. So then I can just grab it and I could turn it down. So let's come over here. It looks like there's a breath there.
sun stepped in, oh the glory.
Ooh, but there's a great one.
Then your son stepped in, oh the glory of it all. So let the walls cave in, break my
So there's another one. So we can just tab over. Just grabbed it, turn it down a little bit.
cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came.
Hitting that de-esser pretty hard.
My Jericho, I know you came to win.
So here's the next one. This 2, if we want to like just turn down the brightness a little bit or the attack of that T.
Came to win and cap.
So came to win.
Jericho, I know you came to win and you came to win and
So here it is right here. So you can add in nodes on a clip gain line. So I'm going to add in 3 nodes. And I'm doing that by holding down command. So command and clicking is going to add nodes. Option and clicking is going to delete them. So now that I have this node, this is the word 2, the T of the 2 right here. So I'm going to hold down command so I can break the grid a little bit. And I'm going to turn this down. If I don't hold down command and I can only edit by the grid. So I'm going to hold down command so I can kind of break that grid. And I can turn that down. So let's have a listen.
No, you came to win and captivate my soul.
Great. Here's another big breath.
So I was lost.
So I can, again, I usually click before. I'm either going to select it or tab to transient. So I tab to transient, shift click, and let's have a listen.
My soul. I was lost in sin when I
Okay, so that is clip gain. We can go through the whole track and we could be doing clip gain. And when you want to do that, especially your lead vocals, you want your lead vocals to be super tight. Okay. All right. The next thing we're going to do when we're editing is just simple fade ins and fade outs. So this is 2 clips right here. And I want to make sure that there's a nice fade between them so I don't get a pop. So just by holding down command, breaking my grid, and then using the selector tool, I can select in between these 2 clips and hitting F. This is interesting. So this is an error that will pop up. It says 1 or more fade requests are invalid due to insufficient audio data. So we can skip that fade. Basically what that means is one of these tracks, that's all there is in the clip really. So that's as far as that clip goes. I can't drag that one out anymore. This one I can drag out a little bit. So sometimes you've got to adjust your clips just a little bit. So let's have a listen to that, see if that's weird or all right. That's good. So the next thing we're going to do is just go through and we're just going to be making sure that we fade it in and fade it out. If we don't, we could get these pops.
I know you came.
That one's pretty clean.
I know you came to win.
But we can fade it out a little bit. And that's just good practice. Just good practice to go through and fade the start of every clip and the end of every clip and crossfade in between two clips, even if they're just short. Okay. So that's this portion. Okay, so we looked at clip gaining a lead vocal, and we looked at, what do we look at? So we've looked at EQ, we've looked at compression, we looked at de-essing, we've clip gained a lead vocal. Let's skip over to some background vocals and talk about editing some groups of vocals. So right here, let's go find our gang vocals and have a listen to them. So right here we have some gang vocals, and I'm going to solo these up. And let's have a listen to our gang vocals. Oh, right here is probably the best spot because it looks like there's the most of them. Let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win, captivate my soul. I was lost in. Cool. Okay, so we have gang vocals. So I'm going to shift option just takes anything I've selected, and basically shift option is do this to anything that's selected. So shift option is going to, whatever my next command is, it's going to do to anything I have selected. So shift option, I'm going to command click these. So shift option command click, and it bypassed. And then I'm going to shift option command that. Even though I didn't have to, I could have just command click this. So now this is what our vocals sound like. Our background gang vocals sound like, just dry, no time-based automation. Also let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win, captivate my... Okay, so let's just take a listen to one of these. Here is, so right now these are grouped. So anytime I hit solo, it's grouping them. To break the group, just hold control. So that's fun. So now let's have a listen. Okay, and typically I'm going to EQ these as a group. I'm not going to do a lot of EQ just on individual tracks. You see it's pretty sparse. I'm going to bring these into a subgroup. I'm going to do all the EQing, and then I'm going to edit afterwards on, and treat them like a group. So here's overall compression for this group. So here's an 1176. And it's pinning it. Here's before. Nice and clean. And now it's kind of like distorts it a little bit and garbles it up a bit. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that later so I can really one, I'm trying to control the dynamic range, and two, I want the extra harmonics to make it sound a little bit crunchier. So the next thing up is this EQ. And this is a wild EQ. That's on. On. So, probably, again, one of the mistakes I made, I'm still making mistakes, but one of the mistakes I made earlier on when I was mixing is I would try to make everything sound great on its own. So I would take these group vocals and I would try to make them sound great. So, I would add like at 14K, at 10K, I would add a little 1K. I would boost the low end just to make this sound amazing. But in the end, you'll notice it gets quite a bit darker. Well, the reason it gets quite a bit darker is because I want the lead vocals to be the thing that sounds great. I don't want my background vocals. Like my background vocals, the way I'm mixing them, are meant to be in the back. So I'm using EQ, I'm using compression to make sure that they stay in the back. So my release time isn't all the way quick. My EQ, I'm taking a lot of the high end out of this vocal. So my lead vocal wins. So that's the thought behind it. So and there's other things in this mix that are going to be competing with the lead vocal as well. Let's turn the lead vocal back on, and I'll take this EQ out, and then I'll put it back in, and just take a listen to the lead vocal, how the lead vocal gets unmasked, okay, once this EQ is activated. So I'm going to take this EQ out and we'll listen to this part.
Also let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and captivate my soul.
And let me turn the automation. The automation is on. Let me just pump this up.
Also let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came.
So let's take a listen to this lead vocal. We're going to take a listen to this lead vocal, and I'm going to bypass this EQ in and out, and you take and you'll hear how the lead vocal gets masked in the end.
Also let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win and
The lead vocal
captivate my
disappears.
soul. I was lost in sin when I was in control. Then your son stepped in, oh the glory of it all. So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win.
Okay, so there's a lot of things going on here, but that's kind of pretty helpful when it comes to making room for that lead vocal. So that's the reason that I've EQ'd it this way. And so in addition to that, I've also got a de-esser, which is probably not going to have to work super hard now because I've taken all that high end out.
Also let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win.
So after that, then I just really have time-based. I really have time-based delay. But let's take a let's take a look quick at our trim levels. We have decent level, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Really, with this gang vocal, it's going to come down to automation. So when we're ready to talk about automation, we'll come back here. For as far as editing, let's edit this now. So we have this whole, and like I said, I'm going to edit as a group. So this whole section right here, there's nothing. So I'm just going to create a group. So the way I did that is I just select everything I want to be in the group so I can edit at the same time. I'm going to hit Command G, and then it automatically puts anything I've selected. It says, currently in group, and then I can name the group, best gang vocals ever group. I already have a group with gang vocals, and I called it Gang Vox. So it's right here. So that's on, and now it's off. So if the Gang Vox group is off, I can do stuff to individual channels. If I come over here and turn it on, once I do one thing to one thing, it does it to them all. Okay, so I want that on. There's nothing happening here. Nothing. So I can just grab this whole section, hit delete. So that's great. There's nothing happening here. So I can grab this whole section just so I can see right now. What's really neat is I can go over to Gang Vox and I could say show only tracks in this group. So here, now I'm looking at Pro Tools. It's just the gang vocals. This is great for editing. So I can come over here. I'm like, okay, this is where the gang vocals start. I hit T because my keyboard shortcuts in this window are on. So that means all my keyboard shortcuts are for the edit window. If I change that key focus, okay, over to here, then I can use letters on my keyboard to toggle groups on and off, but I want to keep it on my edit window. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to come right up to here. That's when the transient starts. So I'm going to hit delete. And then I'm going to do a fade in. It looks like it starts right here. So I'm going to fade in a little bit. F. See, it fades them all.
I am circling, Jesus, you broke their walls.
So one thing that I like to do with background gang vocals is I like to take out any breaths. They don't get to breathe. Only the lead vocalist gets to breathe. So isn't that cool? So right here, there's a breath. So right here. So I'm going to take this. Everyone breathe at the same time. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to delete it. And then right here at the end of this note, I'm going to fade it out. So select and then fade, and I'm going to fade this part in. So only the lead vocal gets to breathe. Why? Because I don't want to hear. That's great. I don't want to hear a whole lot of breathing happening from everywhere. It's distracting. Now, I've taken out a lot of the high end, so you don't hear as much as that breathing. But I just like to go in and edit it out. So harmonies don't get to breathe. Background vocalists don't get to breathe. Gang vocals don't get to breathe. The only person who gets to breathe in a lot of tracks that I do is the lead singer. And I want to hear those breaths because I want it to be natural. So I just don't want to hear multiple breaths. So I'm going to go through on all of my harmonies and all of my gang vocals. I'm going to listen and all the breaths are gone.
When you ransomed me, so many struggles.
So right here, this was edited before, and you can tell because it goes quiet. But typically, this will all sound like room tone, and people will be waiting and kind of bobbling with mic cords and whatnot. That's already been taken out, and this has been re-rendered. But I'm just going to take it out again, just for the visual, really. So now I faded that out. I'm going to fade this next part in, and I'm going to look for maybe the next breath.
So many struggles. I'm circling.
So there's a little breath before that starts, and that's going to be gone. So it's going to be so many struggles, and then a tight circling. So let's have a listen to that.
So many struggles. Circling.
So that was a little bit too much, but hey, fret not. It's non-destructive in Pro Tools. So we just grab this fade, and we're going to hold down Command to break the grid. And I'm just going to dial it back a little bit, and I'm going to take a listen to that.
Circling.
Nice. I get the C back in circle. Lovely. Love having the C in circle.
You broke their walls.
There's like a little bit of a breath right here, so I can just come over here and delete this piece, and then come in here, fade it back in.
You broke their walls.
Clean.
When you ransomed me.
Cool. All right, so that's editing big groups. I love to edit groups in groups. So I turn the group on. I'm going to edit the whole thing. Clip gain comes in super handy here too. So we could just come in and we could turn just sections up or down. But I'm going to do that in a moment just using automation. Okay, automation. No, it's just automation. There's no such thing as automation, but there's automation. Okay. Crack open our aha. So now we're at the point where we can start looking at our time-based effects. So we've run through editing single tracks. We've edited in some groups. We've used trim. We've used EQ. We've used compression. We're ready to talk about time-based effects, and then we're ready to talk about automation, and this is over. Okay, let's talk about some time-based effects. So in this case, we're going to talk about delay and reverb. So those are probably the two most common time-based effects. So we have these background vocals, and I'm using a send. I'm using two sends on each track, and one is going to bus 9, and the other is going to bus 10. So bus 9, I'm outputting this, is coming over here to this channel. So this is the input on this channel. And if I go down, it says del L, so or delay left. And on top on an insert track on this channel, it says Echo Boy. So the way that this was set up is I set up a bus. So I right-clicked, I just regular clicked. I chose a bus. So in this case, like I'm choosing a new bus, bus 11. Okay. And then with this track selected, I hit Shift Command N, and then I added a mono aux input, and then I gave it a name, Bob. So Bob gets created, and he goes right beside del left for this example. This is an aux track, so I like to solo safe aux tracks. So it's solo safed. I command click that S. Solo safe means even if I solo these tracks, signal is still going to pass through this track if I'm sending it because it's solo safed. So if this is not solo safed, when I have these tracks selected and they're soloed, no audio is going to pass through this because it is not soloed. So I'm solo safing it. So now audio will pass through. At this point, I would add, I'm just going to I'll add it fresh. So I'm adding a delay plugin. So one of my favorite delays is Echo Boy, and it would pop up, and I would change the mix to 100% wet. So what dry wet means is dry is your original signal, wet is the affected signal. Because I'm using this on an aux, I just want to hear the wet signal. I'm going to use the original track as the dry signal, and I'm going to mix them that way. So anything that comes out of Bob right now is going to be just affected. Okay. So for this example, right now it comes default. It comes to an eighth note. So we can listen to that. I have some filters I can select, and I have feedback. Feedback is the amount of repetitions I'm going to get. So max will never turn off. It'll be like infinity delay. If you had the time to sit there and listen to it, it wouldn't end, and that would be it. Over here, some very helpful knobs. You have saturation, and you have input and output, and then you have tape style. So it defaults to studio tape. When you change these tape styles, it changes the way the delay sounds. It changes the filters, basically. And it does a little bit more than that as well. Here we have options: single echo, dual echo, ping pong, rhythmic echo. We'll start with single echo. It'll get my point across. So I have bus 11 coming through Bob. Bob needs an output. Bob needs to go somewhere. So I'm going to send Bob out to, I think I have an all vocals. I don't have an all effects. So that's where I'm going to send Bob. Okay, Bob is going to my all vocals track. Now that I have bus 11 set up on this gang mail vocal, and we have Bob almost set up, we have to assign an input. So right now I'm going to use bus 11. And so I'm going to have to assign Bob's input to bus 11. So now these are going to be connected. Okay, so bus 11, bus 11. I usually like to take this one step further. You see right now it says like bus 9 and 10, which we'll get to in a second, but everything else I have is labeled. So typically I like to label my buses so I can find them. So I'm going to rename this bus 11. I'm going to name it Bob. And notice how it changes here, but it will also change right here. So here we go, labeling our sends. Okay. So Bob is being sent out here, and this is Bob's home over here. Okay. So output, input, and then I'm outputting it out my all vocals channel. So let's take a listen to what happens to this with no effects. So this is the amount I'm going to send. So my effects will change as this goes up. Okay. So this is no. And now let's turn this whole part up. Here we go. Okay, so you see how this gets a little nutty. And if I turn up the feedback like crazy. Cool. All right, so let's get in. Now that we know how to set it up, let's get into what I did in the track. So I'm going to erase this. So Bob disappears. And notice how that kind of goes on for quite a while, right? Now Bob is gone. See you later, Bob. It was fun. So let's take a listen to what is happening here. So we have time-based effects, and this is a group. So I am going to turn all of these back on. Shift, Option, and then Command, and it's going to be hitting this del left, del right, but I want you to see this delay left and delay right. So the delay left is 180 milliseconds. The delay right is probably 220. Is 220 milliseconds. Okay. Mix 100% wet. Okay. A little bit of feedback. Notice how the feedback is a little bit different on both of them. Probably they are. And that's because I want there are different delay times, and I want them eventually to line up with the amount of repeats. Okay. So that's what we have going on into delay left and delay right. So delay left is panned all the way to the left. Delay right is panned all the way to the right. And I have them both being outputted to this reverb. So I have this reverb set up, and then I have that EQ'd. So this is a little bit going on here. So here it comes. This is all the things that are happening to these gang vocals. Well, not all, but this is some of the things happening to these gang vocals. Okay, so that's a lot of plugins. So let's take a listen just to this part right here. So you hear those delay throws? Okay, so we're making them just a little bit bigger. So if I will mute this. This will mute everything because these delays are coming into this reverb. So listen before.
You ransom me.
And after.
You ransom me.
Okay. Pretty cool. Notice you can EQ delays, returns, and EQ returns. Sorry, delay returns, reverb returns. I EQ them all. I usually you can get a lot. You can get really muddy really quick if you just leave all the low end in all your effect sends, and it can get really brittle and essy and stuff like that if you leave all the high end in. So EQ your returns. I would definitely start experimenting with that. Okay, so here's the next thing. So all of these are coming into this Delverb, but in addition to that, I have sends on the group itself. So the first send I have is a short reverb. So the short reverb, goodness, we'd have to find short reverb. It's not even here. So where's short reverb? So here's short verb. And what is short verb? Oh my gosh, I just lost it. No, it's there. Short verb is a deverb. And it's a really quick, it's like a less than a second of decay time, which is the tail, the amount of times it takes for the reverb to turn off. A pretty quick pre-delay time of 20 milliseconds. So it takes 20 milliseconds. So the original signal comes through. The reverb won't turn on for sort of 19 milliseconds, and then the reverb turns on. What that does is it takes away some of the mud that reverb introduces when you put it across a signal. So you still want the clarity and attack. So that's helpful. And then afterwards, there's a little EQ on it. And by little, I mean lots. So I'm boosting some high end and some cutting out a lot of low end up to almost 400 hertz. So let's take a listen to those vocals, those background vocals with that short reverb enabled. Okay.
You ransom me.
That's huge.
You ransom me.
And with it on.
You ransom me.
So that's really putting us into a space. The next thing we have is this chamber. So a chamber, it was right beside that short reverb. So let's go find it. So here's our chamber reverb. So this is a UAD Capital Studios chamber reverb. This thing takes a lot of DSP to run. It's a pain in the butt, but it sounds great. So on this chamber reverb, there's a pre-delay. It's closer to 30 milliseconds or 40. The mix, sorry, the decay is max. So it's like, hey, make this thing go forever. And then there's a little bit of a treble boost, a tiny bit. I'm not using a filter. Shame on me. That is a little bit surprising. And then, so let's engage that filter in, okay? So there's no filter, but let's play with the filter and turn it on. So here's with this chamber, these background vocals. My computer is like doesn't know what to do with itself. All right, so here's with the chamber. And let's filter out. Let's mute the short reverb. And let's bypass this. And turn back on this chamber reverb again. That's pretty cool. And let's filter it more. See how the mud is all out now? And let's take it off. Just a little bit more low end energy in there. Just cleans it up a bit. Now we're filtering out a lot of this. Cool. Let's put the short reverb back in. It's nice. And muted. And back in. So that's, I mean, mixing with time-based effects, we did a little bit there. So we were sending it out to a couple delays and feeding those delays into a reverb. And then we were adding just overall like a short reverb, a room to the background vocal tracks, and then putting them through a chamber. And we were able to get a pretty big sound. That's like, I love that part about mixing. Like that's the stuff that's a lot of fun for me. and I enjoy placing elements in different spaces. To me, that's fun. So I also have a bit of phase hitting these. I also am using a little bit of phase on these background vocals, so we can listen to the phase. Let's listen without anything else, so just the phase. We'll listen to that, so I can mute this right here. So here comes the phase.
You ransom me.
And muted.
You ransom me.
Now this is a Sound Toys. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a frequency and I'm kind of boosting that frequency a little bit. And what this is doing is kind of pushing my background vocals out the side just a little bit more. I like using phase on background vocals and even guitars. Micro Shift is another plugin. It's a little bit different. It's using time and quick delays, but it's also using pitch. So the phase mistress is really kind of frequency based, like a filter, almost filtering out those specific frequencies. So let's like crank this so we can really hear it.
You ransom me.
So that's probably a better. It's like a.
You ransom me.
And like, let's go back to where it was. Oh, maybe it's thinking about it. Command Z is our friend.
You ransom me.
So I'm just using a little bit of this. So that's Phase Mistress. So again, Phase Mistress, something that it's fun to experiment with. And I experiment with it on vocals, and I like it on guitars, like I was saying. I think I've put it on bass before too. It's just like it's a cool, I think, underrated plugin. And I'm using it in this case to pop these vocals out the side just a little bit more. So let's put all these effects back in. And let's have a listen one more time.
You ransom me.
And then we'll restart it.
You ransom me.
To where we ended up.
You ransom me.
Okay, so that's time-based processing. We have a whole lot of it. So let's take a listen now to the very last thing we want to talk about today, which is automation. So you stuck with me, and I appreciate it. Let's take a listen to another portion of the song for mixing vocals automation, because we haven't listened to twilicing yet, and that could be a lot of fun. So let's take a look at some automation, and maybe I'll do a quick recap. I don't know. Haven't scripted this part. Maybe not. Let's take a listen to automation. So we have a harmony right here, and this might be a good spot to be, or these ad libs as well. So there's a little bit of automation happening in both these two spots. So the lanes that we can view our audio in, the main two lanes are going to be waveform, which looks like that. And you can use the minus key on your keyboard. It will toggle back and forth between the waveform and the automation. We want to look at the automation. So what is automation? What can you automate? And the answer is you can automate anything with a button on it. Okay. We're going to look, to begin, we're just going to look at this vocal. But later on, let's take a look at automating some, we're going to take a look at automating a reverb. Okay. So we'll start right here, and you'll notice we're going to take a listen right here, and you'll notice her vocal is going to be a bit lower, and then it's going to get higher. So and the way that we're doing that is the same way we did clip gain, command, clicking, adding nodes. Okay. There's a bunch of different ways to do automation. I either like to just make a selection and with the smart tool on, turn stuff up or turn stuff down, or I'll add nodes. So command clicking, and I'll grab those nodes and I'll turn them up, or I'll turn them down. So Command Z a couple times. To delete nodes, minus, minus, hold down Option and click the node. Another way to do it is to grab your pencil tool. Do I do automation like this? No, but you can do it. So I can just kind of go like that. And now I have a whole bunch of automation points. Probably the way I do it the most is I will take, these are my automation options. So I have off, read, touch, latch, and write. So I'm going to go into touch. So I'm going to grab the fader, and then I can listen. And as I listen through, I'll turn my smart tool back on. As I listen through, I can adjust the fader. And you notice when I let go of it, it will go back to the original value. So let's take a listen to some automation, then I can write some new automation.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win.
So if I wanted to come in here, like over here, let's just listen to this real quick so you can see it happen, and the fader's going to move with it.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho.
Okay, so the fader comes up and gets louder. So I can hit the playhead a little bit before this. Now that I'm in touch mode, I'm going to move the fader, and you'll see when I let go of the mouse, the fader returns. So this is the first mode of automation.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho. I know you came to win.
I'll just do some wild stuff. Okay. So this is the automation that I just wrote in. And then after I finished my automation, I let go of the mouse, and then my fader came back to the previous spot. The other option is latch mode. So in latch mode, when I let go of the fader, it's just going to stay to the last area I put it in. So let's take a listen to that.
So let the walls cave in, break my Jericho.
I let go,
I know
and it's
you
up.
came to win. Captivate my soul.
Okay, so that's latch mode. So those are two very helpful modes of automation. When I'm all finished my automation, I would put it back into read mode. I'm going to delete my automation. So when I'm finished my automation, I would put it back into read mode. So now I can't mistakenly add automation, which I've done before. So put it back into read mode. Now it's just going to read the automation. Your other option is putting into off, which just disables any automation you've written, any automation in any one. So it could be on this volume automation. We're going to take a look at a reverb throw in a second. It's going to take everything and turn it off, okay? And then the final mode, which I just clicked away from, is write. So write writes over any automation. And I typically don't use that. I'm usually, if I make bad automation moves, I'm just going to select them and I'm going to delete them. Or I'm going to hit Command Z. So if I don't need a node there, I'm going to select it and I'm going to delete it. Okay, so that's volume automation. And you will see me use automation on drum, on everything. Everything is going to get automated. And we're at the point now where we're ready to do that, especially lead vocals. Like lead vocals are going to be heavily automated to make sure everything is super consistent. And so are all the instruments for that matter. Like there's going to be a lot of automation on this session. All right. Let's take a look at something else that you can automate. So we've automated volume on a fader. Okay, that's great. Let's take a look at ROM. So ROM is probably my favorite reverb for like creative reverb. This thing is crazy. It was free for like a minute. It's no longer free, but it was when they introduced it. And sometimes free things are really good things. So now let's take a look at what we're doing. So I have, and you can, anything with a button, anything at all, you can automate. So what we've done, is I've taken ROM and I have the mix. So check out this mix level right here. So in ROM itself right here, you'll see this little knob. And I came up to that knob and I clicked on it. Control, Option, Command, clicked. And now this has its own lane and I can automate it. I can automate it in any of the ways I've just showed you, automating that lead vocal. Right now, in the lane, we're not looking at volume. We're not looking at the wave form. We are looking at the mix knob in ROM. So let's take a listen to what it's doing right here. So here comes Twyla's ad-lib. Now I'm going to bypass ROM in general so you can hear what it was before. Okay, and this after. So now we get like that natural rise and fall of that reverb. So it's like it's little things like that 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 can really add to your production and really. Do I have other examples of automation? Absolutely. But I think we've hit everything we wanted to hit so far. Like in this tutorial, I think we've captured a lot, and it's taken a while to get through it all. So I think I want to cut it there. We've looked at dynamic-based processing, so we've looked at EQs, and we've looked at compression, and we've looked at de-essers, which is another, it's like a multi-band compressor. So we've looked at that. We've looked at editing. So we've taken out some breaths, and we've turned them down with clip gain. And then we've gone from there, and we've looked at time-based processing. So we used delays, we used some reverbs, we touched on using some phase, and then we went in and we've capped it all off with automation. So I think we've really captured some different phases of when it comes to mixing and editing vocals. I really hope that some of that was helpful. I hope that some of it will inspire you in your own productions as well. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to the next tutorial.